Absolutely. And that's that divine connection, right? To be in touch with the essence of who we are. That's why we hug each other. That's why we feel that energy. So this morning I say good morning. Welcome once again to Interfaith Spiritual Center Worldwide. We know that nothing happens by chance, that everything is by divine appointment, and that we have a divine appointment this morning. Our viewing audience is tuned in because there's something here for you. And as we gather in this amazing, amazing life, Dr. Ernest Holmes wrote a book called This Thing Called You. And he also wrote a sequel, This Thing Called Life, where the energy is about co-creation with that higher power moving through each of us as life, as energy, as aliveness, that we can recreate our experience. This is what really drew me into this way of life. Just think, 50 years ago, I walked in to a religious science church in La Crescenta, California, and I heard the minute, I sat way in the back because I thought I need a quick getaway just in case. And there was a very smiley man at the door, way too smiley. And so I gave myself that out. And the minister, Dr. Guy Lorraine, he said, I want you to know you're all beautiful. You are created in the image and likeness of God. You're no less than the sun, the trees, and the stars. You have a right to be here. And I had never quite heard it that way. And I could just kind of, relax into it and realize that he was speaking what I had always known in my heart and soul, that there is oneness. And in this oneness, we live and move and have our being. This thing called you is the energy of God in you. The still small voice of God is our intuition. We are guided and directed in these paths of right living, right thinking, right livelihood, as Buddha put it. And what's so amazing about our way of life is that at any moment that we don't like what's come up in our lives, that be still and know that I am God, that help is not only on the way, help is within us, guiding and directing us every single moment. We're going to talk about life cycles this morning. We're going to talk about the ebb and flows of life. We're going to acknowledge that the whole universe is affected by these cycles. And we hear a lot about, with the full moon energy, and that affects the tides and affects people's behavior and it affects, a lot of things going on in the world. We hear, I have friends that are police officers and they say, it gets crazy when it's a full moon, out there. But the truth is, there is a power for good in the universe greater than we are, and we can use it. It is there, it's available, we tap into it. It moves beyond color, race, creed, or sexual orientation. Our God is a God of oneness. And that as we open to that oneness and we feel that divine connection and we acknowledge that during, the flows of life, we're on top of the world. Things just are fabulous. They're wonderful. Ain't it great? And the minute we go into the ebb, it's like, oh, this stuff really doesn't work. My life just sucks. How many of us have heard that? Well, we put that energy out into the universe says, yes, it does, and here's a little more to be upset about, right? That's why it's important to bless everything, because everything is a molecular, it's electromagnetic energy, and it responds to our thoughts and it responds to our words. And I want you to know, I just absolutely amazed myself. Last week, Kate Schreiber and I were going to Fool's Folly, which really does a wonderful fundraiser for the Well in the Desert, which is feeding the homeless every day. They receive a hot meal. And so I got in my car, and I turned it on, and it went click. No, this can't be. And I went click again. And I did it the third time where I went click. And I said, it's really interesting. I paid attention when I had to call AAA. And he said, I'm getting all of the high feedback that your battery's not dead. So he lifted up a little thing. He showed me the battery, and he said, see this knob? Make sure that, because, when you're driving around, it loosens up, and it loses the connection with the ignition. So make sure it's really tight. So, I kind of act like I know what I'm doing. Kay's kind of like bewildered. Are we going to get there in time? I put the thing up, and I do the little twisty thing on it. It didn't twist a lot, just a little bit. And I said, okay, very good. And I got the car, and I went, shh, and it just started right up. She goes, you're amazing. Aren't I, though? I do not see myself as mechanically inclined whatsoever. This is a miracle. There is a God, right? There absolutely is. And that we go through these little experiences. And and it's all right to be upset when something hits for about 2 minutes. And then to get on the solution level, and I advocate a gratitude list. Everything that we are grateful for, all the energies that are there for us, that we got up this morning, we took our first conscious breath. And then go from there, and the loved ones in our lives, and the little insignificant things that mean so much. Love is in the details. It's not the great biggies, it's the little things. It's the special cards that Alice sends us, and they're beautiful, and I save every one, and all the little thank you notes, and the beautiful energy, and the opportunity. Some of us have pets, and it's wonderful to have pets because they love us unconditionally. Doesn't matter where we've been, what we've done, they're licking our face in the morning saying, good morning. And we arise to the occasion because it is joy. And we know that joy is the most infallible sign of the presence of God. It's the joy factor. So when we're looking at the cycles of life and the ebbs and flows, I come to mind with Jill. Her name is Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor. She was a neuroautomatist and a neuroscientist. And she said, one morning I got up, I put the bread in the toaster. It was a great morning. And all of a sudden I felt something hit. And I was on the ground. Now, I am a neuroscientist, a neuroanatomist. I know that I'm having a stroke. I know from all the patients I've seen, I know from all of the studies I've done, I am on the floor and I am having a stroke, and I cannot move my body. And she was due to go and see her mother. And she saw her cell phone. And she said, if I can just get to the cell phone. And she said, my thoughts were getting more and more scrambled. And I kept edging, and finally I edged enough where I could pull something, and the cell phone fell down. By this time, I cannot talk. I cannot speak. It's not making sense. I am on the ground. And I get the cell phone, and I press the button. I think she said she didn't do it with her hand, she did it with her chin or something. And her mom answered, and she went, And her mother knew immediately. She just called 911, she got over there. She was, of course, hospitalized, and she said, here, I was a scientist. And my left brain was not functioning at all. But something happened in my rehabilitation. I had such a willingness to go through it. And my whole right hemisphere of my brain opened up, and I discovered I'm an amazing artist. An amazing artist. And in her rehabilitation, where she talks about this experience, and that when it's happening to you, to know that it's happening to you, and that the first hour is the most important in a situation like this. And the fact that she edged herself, that she took all of her energy and edged herself so she could finally reach something that would get that phone down so she could call her mom. And her mom, intuitive enough to know this is not my Jill. And that out of that experience and the hospitalization, the rehabilitation, and all of that, the right side of the brain hemisphere opens up and she becomes an amazing, amazing artist and writer. She wrote a fabulous book. She said, this was not a negative experience for me. This was a stroke of insight. A stroke of insight. And when we have these experiences in our lives, when we can acknowledge, no, this looked negative, it looked like everything was stacked against me, it looked like I was beating myself up over it and the whole 9 yards. When we can stand up and say, through this cycle, I will see it through. I will receive the stroke of insight that this has shown up in my life to get my attention. Because once it gets our attention, mindfulness. Buddha said that man, woman is the result of all that they have thought. All that we have thought. And so when we open the space to allow God to do what God does best by means of us, and that these things come up, and believe me, it's really interesting. In my 40 years of the ministry, there have been some just amazing experiences. And in my San Diego ministry, where I had 3,000 people showing up every week, and television ministry, getting the word out there, radio, you name it, there was a moment where I just felt that I need to do something differently. I wasn't having an experience of my own ministry. I felt like, kind of a fundraiser and a business person and an administrator and all of these other things, even though I had a staff of 25 people. And there was a ministry that was opening up in another location in Los Angeles County. My mentor, it was 10.5 acres. It was absolutely beautiful. There was a children's school of 363 children. I would be doing chapel every morning. I thought, this is an opportunity. And so they came down, and the Board of Trustees, and then they heard me speak, and then they wanted to see me after and wanted me to be their minister. And which I did accept because I felt like this was the universe. But what happened is that there were 6 assistant ministers that were women, and they really felt, that they went down and got, what are we, the ugly stepsisters, Cinderella's come in, and we've been here all this time working to the bone, all I've done for them, look at I've been up and down and everywhere. And we're quite resentful. And so they had 60 people, and when my mentor had it, there were hundreds. And so in 1 year's time, I went non-stop. In 1 year's time, we had 600 people coming, 2 services, classes, you name it, 12-step programs, we had it all. We had a beautiful children's ministry. It was fabulous because they had a hotel on the grounds, and they wanted me to take as my own private residence this beautiful suite. And I said, no, we need this for the children's ministry. And they can come, and I really felt deeply. So I took one of the smaller rooms because I had not sold my house in San Diego yet. And finally my house sold, and after 1 year's time, I had all of these ladies speak for me so that they would get a sense that I was welcoming them and that they didn't need to resent me. But as Ernest Holmes said, convince a man against his will, he's of the same opinion still. And so I went on my 1 month vacation, and they, filled in, but then they told everyone that I had resigned, and then they made up all of these stories, and then the Board of Trustees got involved because they thought, we're paying her all this money, and then we got these little assistant ministers, well, who, we can just pay them for a Sunday, and they started thinking in those terms. So when I got back after 1 month, I was informed that my services were no longer needed, if you can imagine. They were no longer needed. And that the assistant ministers were going to take over. And I was just like, I cannot tell you how I was devastated and how outrageous it was. Well, the people went into a great flurry and said, no, we're not going to have this, fire the Board of Trustees. And what was so interesting is that this is what turns people off about churchianity. They went into such vindictiveness and energy unlike what you would ever imagine. Now, when I was building it up, I was riding high, and we were getting so much done, and we were putting out this message, and it was fabulous. And in a year's time, suddenly, my services are no longer needed. And so the day they were going to have a great big vote and put out every kind of horrible thing about me that you can imagine. I didn't know they knew that much about my sex life either. And I thought, boy, it sounds pretty good. I wish this were true. And so, yeah, I was voted out. And they hired 5 armed guards to escort me out. I want you to know that at that moment, I never knew I was powerful. But when these 5 armed guards, can you imagine in a church? 5 armed guards escorted me out, and they were so cute. They were youngish guys. You seem such a beautiful, wonderful woman. We're just so sorry we're doing this. And I said, oh, honey, let it go. Pick up your check, at the end of the day. You've done your job, right? And my son-in-law stood up to this body of people, and he said, look at yourself. You call yourself spiritual? Out of something like this, people won't even want to walk into a church. You need to be ashamed of yourselves. And everybody, and my daughter's crying, and it was really emotional. And I walked out, and I went across the street to the hotel the following Sunday, and I mean, we had like 700 people show up. They had this empty facility that was gorgeous with the stained glass, the 10.5 acres, the hotel, the children's school, which I felt very sad about. But I went across the street and started anew, and it was a cycle. And let me tell you, I had tears, I was disappointed, I had left, a very successful ministry. How could this happen? But had that not happened, and I was there for 4 additional years, and when Terry Cole Whitaker called and said, I've been here in Palm Springs for a year, and I'm not a very good fit, my book is taken off, and she wrote What You Think of Me Is None of My Business, and that was on the New York sellers, that was on for over a year, New York Times bestseller list. And she said, I'm not a very good fit, and you are a much better fit than I am. So she had actually started Interfaith, but when she left, she took, was really doing business as adventures of enlightenment. So had I not had that experience and totally initiated into the ministry, because, you can put up with a little bad PR, but being asked to leave, I mean, that was absolutely monumental for me. And then to realize, destroy this house, and in 3 days, I will build it up again. And so when we look at our life cycles, the ebbs, the flows, all of the influences that are going on in the planets, and that when we have these moments, it's so we can have a stroke of insight that we are bigger than any of our experiences. We are not the product of our circumstances, and they do not define us. We are about our Father, Mother, God's business. And I know that it's good and very good. So as Joseph said to his 11 brothers that sold him into slavery, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. So we have these experiences so that we can rise up as the phoenix from the ashes of burnt offerings to the truth of our being. And then I accepted the call to Interfaith Spiritual Center. I love Palm Springs. We've had our challenges with being a nonprofit, but you know what? We're still here. We are still here. And where are we going? Higher yet. Where? Higher yet. Where? Higher yet in love. And so it is. God bless you.